Namaste and welcome to your UPSC News Analysis for the 1st of May, 2025.
Hello.
Today, we're diving deep into some really crucial happenings, the kind that directly impact your UPSC preparation.
Especially for the mains exam, yeah.
Exactly. We'll break down these complex issues, maybe refresh some basic concepts, and really pinpoint why these developments matter for you.
Sounds good. What's on the agenda?
Okay, so we'll look at the Union Cabinet approving caste enumeration in the census. Big one.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Then, the Supreme Court declaring digital access a fundamental right. Also, India closing its airspace to Pakistani airlines.
Right, the recent tensions.
We've got the Navy getting new surveillance ships, the unfortunate wall collapse at Simhachalam Temple.
The safety concerns there.
The Supreme Court staying Lokpal action against high court judges. And finally, a report about the Aluva-Munnar Road potentially harming elephant habitats.
Quite a mix. Environment, security, governance.
Exactly. The goal is to unpack all this, connect the dots for you, and give you a really solid understanding. Let's get started.
Okay, let's begin with the census. Just a quick refresher. It's that huge exercise India does every 10 years.
The decennial census, right? Collecting population data, economic status, social details.
Pretty much everything. Precisely. The last one was 2011. The 2021 one, well, it got delayed. COVID.
Right. Now, caste enumeration within that.
Yeah, so traditionally the census counts scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, but a full count of all castes hasn't happened since, what, 1931?
A long time ago, there was the SECC in 2011, the Socioeconomic and Caste Census.
There was, but it wasn't officially part of the main census, and it had issues, like 46 lakh unique caste names reported. Bit messy, data-wise.
So reliability was questioned. But why is good caste data actually important?
Well, it's crucial for targeted welfare schemes, making sure help reaches the right people. Also for affirmative action policies for OBCs and other backward sections. Need solid data for that.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the main news here. Yesterday, April 30th.
The Union Cabinet gave the green light. Caste enumeration will be part of the next census.
It's pretty historic, isn't it? First official count since 1931.
It is. And they're going digital this time. A mobile app.
With drop-down menus for caste options, trying to standardize things.
Hopefully avoiding the SECC confusion. It's a massive undertaking. Over 30 lakh enumerators involved.
And it's legally backed, part of Phase 2, under the Census Act. The ministers, Vaishnaw and Shah, framed it as being about inclusion and data-based policy.
Right. Now, looking back, that 1931 census is the benchmark, really?
And the 2011 SECC data, as we said, largely unusable for caste specifics.
Yeah. And recently, states like Bihar, Karnataka, Telangana, they've done their own surveys.
Because the demand for this data is there. Constitutionally, Articles 15.4 and 16.4 allow for affirmative action.
Exactly. And remember, the Mandel Commission back in 1980, it recommended 27% OBC reservation based on that old 1931 data.
Which is why even anti-IOG has been saying we need better updated caste data for effective policies.
And the government says they'll use a new code-based directory this time to prevent duplication and misclassification.
That sounds promising. Beyond welfare, how else might this data be used?
Well, delimitation of constituencies is one area, and it's critical for implementing the 33% women's reservation in legislatures. That's linked to updated census figures.
Okay, now for the mains perspective, this isn't straightforward, is it? It's politically very sensitive.
Extremely. Concerns about vote bank politics, deepening caste identities, those are real.
Operationally, just classifying all the castes accurately across India, huge challenge.
And the risk of data misused for political leverage, that's definitely there. Plus, potential friction between the center and states on using the data, especially for reservations.
So weighing the impacts, socially.
Socially, good data could mean more targeted justice, maybe empower OBCs with a clearer picture of their situation, move beyond guesswork.
Economically.
Better understanding of backwardness for resource allocation, more effective welfare.
Politically, it could really reshape reservation debates, influence constituency drawing.
And power dynamics, for sure.
Yeah.
But ethically, there's the argument it might reinforce caste consciousness. And data manipulation is always a worry with sensitive info.
It's a complex balance, how this data interacts with existing social structures. That's something to watch.
Definitely. So, looking ahead, what's needed?
Transparency in the methodology seems key, getting stakeholders on board.
Right. And strong constitutional safeguards against political misuse. The data should be for welfare, primarily.
And the tech side, the digital system needs to be secure and accurate.
Plus, maybe a national dialogue around this. Build trust.
Ultimately, the aim should be data-driven affirmative action that actually works, that leads to inclusion, and perhaps periodic reviews of the data.
Keep it relevant. Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, let's shift gears. Topic 2. Digital access to e-governance declared a fundamental right by the Supreme Court.
Right. So fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution, enforceable in court. Article 21, right to life, is interpreted broadly.
Includes things needed for a dignified life, and e-governance is just government using tech for services.
But then you have the digital divide. The gap between the haves and have-nots in tech access often mirrors socioeconomic lines.
And against that backdrop, the Supreme Court ruling on April 30th,
Landmark ruling. Digital access to e-governance services is now part of the right to life under Article 21.
meaning citizens can't be denied essential services just because they lack digital access.
Exactly. This came from a PIL challenging digital-only services, PDS, M&RGA wages, land records.
And the bench, led by Justice Chandrachud, directed the government towards universal digital infrastructure and providing alternative access for vulnerable groups.
This fits into the government's big digital push, doesn't it? Digital India mission from 2015.
BharatNet connecting gram panchayats, common services centers, the JAM Trinity.
Right, all aimed at digital empowerment. Even the RTI Act encourages online disclosure. NEGP before that.
So this ruling adds constitutional weight to digital inclusion efforts, links it right back to Article 21.
And connects to directive principles like Article 38, welfare state, and 39A, equal access. Plus, remember the Puttaswamy judgment on privacy. It linked data rights to dignity.
It's like the court is adapting fundamental rights for the digital age.
Precisely. But for the mains, we need to see the challenges too. The digital divide is still stark, right? Urban, rural, gender, income.
Infrastructure gaps, too. Reliable internet, power. They're not universal yet.
And digital illiteracy, a major barrier for many people. Plus, the issue of exclusion when digital authentication fails. Need fallback options.
True. But the potential upsides are significant across different areas.
Socially.
Easier access to schemes, maybe even justice. Empowerment through information.
Economically.
Financial inclusion gets a boost, maybe reduced leakages and benefit transfers, new digital opportunities.
Politically.
Could mean more participation, transparency, easier engagement with government. And ethically, it reinforces dignity, autonomy, non-discrimination in accessing rights in this digital era. The key question is balancing digital efficiency with ensuring nobody's left behind. So the path forward, what needs to happen?
Digital infrastructure needs to be treated almost like a public utility, accessible to all.
Expand physical access points too, like CSCs, maybe offline kiosks in remote areas.
Definitely. And make platforms multilingual, accessible for people with disabilities, user-friendly in regional languages.
Digital literacy drives need scaling up, like PMGDISHA.
Maybe even a specific digital rights and access law to codify these rights.
And crucially, maintain hybrid models. Offer both digital and non-digital ways to access services for now.
Essential for a smooth transition. Okay, next up, India closing its airspace to Pakistani airlines.
Right, international relations angle. So airspace control, it's about national sovereignty, isn't it?
It is. Countries control who flies over their territory. International norms exist, like the Chicago Convention from 1944, but sovereignty is key, especially during tensions.
And India and Pakistan have used airspace restrictions before, like after Balakot in 2019.
Yeah, it's a strategic tool, a non-military way to apply pressure.
So, the current situation. April 30th, India officially closed its airspace to all Pakistani commercial airlines.
The trigger being the Pahalgam terror attack, with suspected Pakistani links.
The Ministry of Civil Aviation issued a no-TAM notice to airmen. Basically, a ban.
This forces Pakistani carriers like PIA onto longer, costlier routes, especially heading east to Southeast Asia.
And it comes amid already high tensions, India recalling its envoy.
Yeah, the diplomatic situation is quite strained. Looking at the framework, we've seen similar actions before.
Chicago Convention is the international backdrop. Domestically, DGCA is the regulator, MOSA sets policy.
And worth noting, there's no current bilateral air services agreement between the two countries. Regional aviation cooperation via SARC hasn't really taken off either.
So for the mains, what are the wider ramifications?
Well, significant disruption for Pakistan's aviation sector. They further break down in diplomatic ties.
Risk of escalation.
Always a concern in this relationship. And impact on passengers, potentially third country nationals using those routes.
Breaking it down strategically.
Sends a strong signal without using military force.
Economically.
Hurts Pakistani Airlines' bottom line, Minimal direct economic impact on India, likely.
Geopolitically.
Could add to international pressure on Pakistan regarding terrorism.
Huh.
And legally, it involves the role of ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, in managing airspace during conflicts. It's fascinating how technical moves have broad strategic weight.
So, strategically, what should India focus on now?
Maintaining restraint while being firm seems important. Using international forums like the UN ICAO to state its case.
Strengthening regional counterterrorism cooperation, though that's always challenging.
Investing in our own aviation security, obviously, and public diplomacy explaining the rationale behind the move.
Okay, let's shift to the seas, India's maritime security push.
Right. Maritime security, basically protecting national interests at sea. Trade routes are exclusive economic zone, or EEZ.
Those sea lanes of communication, SLOCs, are vital for trade and surveillance ships.
Their job is monitoring, intelligence gathering, keeping an eye on things. Our EEZ, extending 200 nautical miles, is a huge area to watch.
And the big news, 2 new indigenous surveillance ships commissioned on April 30th in Visakhapatnam.
INS Invashak and INS Prahari, built by GRSE and HSL.
Aimed at boosting coastal surveillance and maritime domain awareness, MDA, equipped with modern tech.
And this comes at a time of increased activity in the Indian Ocean region, IOR, particularly China's growing naval presence.
This fits into the government's broader maritime vision, right? Sagarmala project.
Deep Ocean Mission, the IMAX Center for Data Fusion, Project Varsha for Naval Infra.
Plus the focus on indigenous defense production under Atmanirbhar Bharat and the overall strategy.
Security and growth for all in the region. It shows India wants to be a key security provider in the IOR.
Looking at the mains angle, what are the key challenges in the IOR?
China's assertiveness is definitely one, keeping pace technologically.
Infrastructure gaps, maybe on our islands?
Yes. And threats from non-state actors, piracy, smuggling. Plus, ensuring smooth interagency coordination is always crucial.
And the impacts of strengthening naval capabilities. Strategically.
Enhanced deterrence, a stronger presence.
Economically.
Securing sea trade, which is the lifeline of our economy. Environmentally, better monitoring against illegal fishing, pollution, etc. Diplomatically, it strengthens partnerships through joint exercises like Milan, Malabar.
Raises the question of balancing security needs with maintaining regional stability.
Always a delicate act.
Okay.
So, the way ahead for maritime security.
Keep strengthening MDA. Maybe expand IMAC's role.
Boost indigenous shipbuilding further. Secure our growing blue economy assets, offshore platforms, etc.
Continue international naval diplomacy. And leverage technology AI, satellites for surveillance.
Makes sense. Okay, next topic is quite tragic. The Simatalam Temple wall collapse.
Yeah, this brings up serious questions about public safety at religious sites, especially during big festivals.
Simatalam Temple in Andhra, dedicated to Lord Narasimha. Tandanatsalam Festival draws huge crowds. Public safety regulations are critical here.
But on April 30th, during the festival, a temporary wall or barricade collapsed.
Very sad. 7 deaths reported, over 30 injured. Reports suggest overcrowding, maybe poor crowd management, lack of exits, weak structure.
The state CM announced compensation and ordered a judicial inquiry to find out what went wrong.
When we look at guidelines, there's the National Building Code, the Disaster Management Act, which mandates risk audits, and EMA fire safety norms.
And state HRNCE departments have a role, but we've seen similar incidents before, haven't we? Sabarimala, Kumbh Melas.
Sadly, yes. It underlines the need for robust pre-event planning, crowd monitoring, setting capacity limits, and actually enforcing them.
For the mains, this points to governance failures, maybe ethical issues too.
Potentially. Lack of regular structural audits. Overcrowding allowed despite potential digital ticketing solutions. Coordination gaps between agencies.
Political sensitivity sometimes hindering strict enforcement too.
That can be a factor. The human cost is devastating. It erodes public trust, raises legal questions.
And impacts the cultural significance of these gatherings if safety isn't ensured. The accountability question is huge here.
Absolutely. So, ensuring public safety going forward.
Mandatory safety audits seem essential. Smart crowd management drones, CCTV, maybe e-passes.
Training for temple staff and volunteers. Investment in better public infrastructure around these sites.
And crucially, legal enforcement when negligence is found. Plus, using digital tools for information, helplines during events.
Proactive measures are needed. Okay, penultimate topic. Supreme Court stays Lokpal action against High Court judges.
Right. First, the Lokpal, it's our independent anti-corruption body. set up by the 2013 Act, investigates public functionaries.
But then there's judicial independence, a cornerstone of our democracy. Judges are usually removed only through impeachment, a complex process outlined in Articles 124 and 217.
So there's been a debate. Does the Lokpal's power extend to investigating sitting judges?
Exactly. And the news is, on April 30th, the Supreme Court paused Lokpal proceedings against 2 High Court judges. There were corruption complaints related to land allotment.
What was the argument for the stay?
That the Lokpal might need prior permission from the Chief Justice of India, or maybe impeachment needs to be initiated first, based on precedents like the K. Veeraswamy case from 1991.
So now a constitutional bench will examine this whole issue. Lokpal's jurisdiction over judges, procedural safeguards needed.
Yes. It's a major test of checks and balances between the judiciary and anti-corruption bodies.
Looking at the existing framework, the Lokpal Act itself doesn't explicitly mention including or excluding the judiciary.
Right. Judicial oversight mainly relies on impeachment and the internal in-house mechanism, which has often been criticized for lacking transparency.
And that judicial standards and accountability bill is still pending, isn't it?
It is. So there's a bit of a vacuum or ambiguity here. This highlights the tension between accountability and independence.
So for Maine's analysis, this touches on judicial accountability gaps, potential overlapping jurisdictions, separation of powers.
And fundamentally, public trust in the judiciary. The impacts could affect institutional balance, ethical governance, the rule of law itself.
How do we find the right balance? Ensure accountability without compromising judicial independence.
It's tricky. Constitutional clarity, maybe through reviving that judicial standards bill, could help.
Reforming the in-house mechanism. Make it more transparent, maybe with some external oversight.
Possibly. Or a model where the Lokpal needs CJI clearance to proceed against a judge. Some propose an independent National Judicial Ethics Commission, as the second ARC suggested.
Using digital tools for tracking complaints could also help transparency, but the core principle is safeguarding judicial independence while ensuring no one is above scrutiny.
A fine line to walk. Okay, final topic. The KFRI report on the Aluva-Munnar Road.
Environment focus. This involves wildlife corridors. What are those exactly?
They're basically strips of habitat connecting larger wildlife populations that have been fragmented, usually by human development like roads or farms.
And fragmentation is bad because
It isolates animal populations, increases human-animal conflict, can lead to inbreeding, loss of biodiversity. Elephants, with their large ranges, are particularly affected. India has a significant elephant population and designated corridors.
and environmental impact assessments, EIAs, are meant to assess these risks before projects start.
Right. So the Kerala Forest Research Institute, KFRI, has put out a report.
Warning against reopening the old Aluva-Munnar Road,
Yes, they say it cuts right through a crucial elephant corridor in the Western Ghats.
which could disrupt elephant migration patterns.
Exactly. And likely increase human-elephant conflict in the Idukki region, which is already a hotspot. The report went to the Kerala Forest Department and the State Environment Impact Assessment Authority, SEIA.
Local communities, especially tribal groups, also have concerns.
Yes, their lives and livelihoods are often closely tied to the forest ecosystem. This highlights the classic development versus environment conflict.
What government protections exist for elephants in corridors?
Well, the Wildlife Protection Act, 1972, lists elephants under Schedule 1 highest protection. There's Project Elephant, launched in 1992.
Eco-sensitive zones, ESCs, around protected areas under the Environment Protection Act in 1986. The National Board for Wildlife plays a role.
And the Wildlife Trust of India has identified over 100 elephant corridors. Plus, the Forest Conservation Act, 1980, regulates land use change. Remember the Gadgil and Kasturrangan reports on the Western Ghats? They also address these issues.
So from a Maine's perspective, this is a classic case of
Environment versus development trade-offs. Roads bring connectivity, economic activity, but can fragment habitats and worsen human-wildlife conflict.
there are also policy conflicts sometimes in implementing ESC rules, and unregulated tourism adds pressure.
Definitely. The impacts are ecological habitat loss, biodiversity decline, social risks to local, especially tribal communities, legal potential violations of environmental laws, and economic short-term gains versus long-term conservation costs and conflict mitigation costs.
The question is, how do we find a balance? Sustainable development that doesn't destroy natural heritage.
Tough one. Strict, impartial EIAs using actual wildlife movement data seem critical.
Exploring alternatives, different road alignments, maybe underpasses or overpasses for wildlife.
Strengthening and legally protecting existing corridors, involving local communities in conservation efforts, community-led models.
Implementing ESE norms effectively, and using technology like camera traps or satellite tagging for better monitoring.
It needs a holistic approach, really.
Right. Well, that covers the key issues for today. That concludes our in-depth analysis of today's crucial news for UPSC aspirants.
We've covered a lot of ground: the census, digital rights, airspace, maritime security, public safety, judicial oversight, and environment.
We hope this deep dive has given you valuable insights and a clearer understanding of these significant issues.
Remember to connect these developments to your syllabus topics.
Subscribe for daily updates, and please drop a comment to share your thoughts or ask questions. You can also download the audio or transcript for revision.
Keep up the hard work.
Kahan!